Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today we're joined by Hal Plotkin. Among other things, Hal is a member of the Foothill Anza Community College Board of Trustees, but he's a lot more than that. Hal, thanks for being on Democratic Television.
Steve, thank you so much for having me on Democratic Television. I have been an admirer of yours now for decades, and like so many people, I'm so grateful to you not only for this program, but for your leadership in our community in building and strengthening the Democratic Party locally. A lot of people don't remember, but I do, that when you became chair of the Democratic Party some time ago, this was hardly a solidly Democratic area. And thanks to your leadership and hard work and dedication over many years now, we've built a very strong Democratic majority in this community that in many ways is leading the nation now with the election of President Obama. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here and to share some time with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to get to know a little bit more about you. I know you're a native of the area and grew up around here, Palo Alto. Give us a little insight as to your background. What was it like growing up? Your childhood wasn't exactly typical.
Well, no, it wasn't, especially for somebody who grew up in Palo Alto. But in a way, there's a real connection between my childhood and the experiences that I had and my involvement in political activism and the Democratic Party. For me, political activism was kind of a way to try and look for a way to form community with others and build a life. My sister and I grew up in Palo Alto, but because of unfortunate family circumstances, we were both forced to drop out of high school before completing it. I somehow managed to get back into high school in the last year and actually got a diploma, but I had dropped out at age 14 to work full-time. My father was not on the scene. It's a bit of a long story, probably more than we can get into here, but he had some problems with the law. And my mother was mentally ill and often depressed and frequently unemployed. So we grew up on welfare and food stamps. I was one of the few kids in Palo Alto that qualified for the free lunch program. I still very much remember the humiliation involved in that. I always wondered why they had to make those kids like us who were part of the free lunch program stand in a separate line from all of the other kids. It was a stigma,
Sure.
every day at high school that we had to go to that special line to get our free lunch. With just a little bit more thought, they could have figured out a way to let my sister and me and the others that were in our situation line up with everybody else. Sure, I'm not involved in the elementary or high school districts now. I serve on a community college board, but I sure hope that's one thing they figured out.
Right.
So I was working pretty much full-time.
Starting at age 14?
Yeah, at age 14. I dropped out of high school to work at a pizza parlor, and then I through upward mobility, became the assistant manager at the Palo Alto Walgreens drugstore. By the time I was 18 years old, I had a key to the store and was locking it up every night and responsible for managing it. And I started going to school at Foothill Community College, where on occasion I'd even walk there. I had a small apartment in Mountain View on Ringsdorf, about 2 miles from the campus. And there were many, many times when I would be able to take a bus to work, but there were no convenient bus or transit services that would get me to Foothill College. So I used to just walk all the way up El Monte and take my classes there. It took me 8 years to graduate college, working full-time all that time.
So that included Foothill and then...
And then San Jose State. I transferred to San Jose State. One of the great ironies in my life is that when I felt like I was being held back, I was actually being pushed forward. And I can tell you what I mean by that. I remember when I was going to Foothill College and working full-time, and I'd watch all these kids that I knew from high school, some of whom I used to help with their homework, you know, sailing through Cal and Harvard and Stanford and all of these places, and you know, with support that I can only envy. And then there I was stuck at Foothill College, taking 1 or 2 classes, whatever I could afford to take. One of the ironies is, though, that in all the time I was there, I formed great relationships with many professors at Foothill College. Truman Cross, Bob Pierce, Bill Tinsley, just to name a few. real giants in higher education here locally. And they did some wonderful things for me. Two of the things they did for me is they helped me develop my talent. They helped me discover first and develop my talent as a writer. That's what I do as a profession.
Yeah.
Most people don't know I got started as a writer professionally. My first writing assignment that I got paid for was an unusual one. I was working at the pizza parlor until 1 o'clock at night one day, and I picked up the local Palo Alto Times. And there was a story in there about high school dropouts. And I thought it was a very pejorative story. It made it sound like it was our fault. And I was just furious. And I went home that night and I wrote a letter to the editor in pencil on a binder paper, just telling them how outraged I was by their attack on people who were in our circumstances. And that I didn't even think they should use the word dropout, that they should use the word pushout. Because at least for my sister and myself, we didn't voluntarily drop out of anything. We would have loved to have been in school. We were pushed out of the system. And I had some other things to say. And I wrote that letter to the editor and sent it in. And a couple of days later, the editor of the editorial page, a wonderful man named Paul Vokes, who I still remember, tracked me down at the pizza parlor and asked me if it would be okay if they published my letter to the editor as an op-ed and paid me $50 for it. You know, and so I was making $1.75 an hour at the pizza parlor, and he was going to pay me $50 for something I had written after work before I went to bed one night. And I think that was the first bell that went off in my head that, you know, maybe I could find a way to get myself out of the pizza parlor.
Well, and also to tell your story and the larger story about real people in America, not necessarily all like the bubbled people in Palo Alto.
Well, that's it. It was, you know, there were a lot of other people in my circumstances. You know, I came to discover poverty is not something that a lot of people like to talk about. And, you know, people are embarrassed and nobody wants to ask for help, particularly in the culture you and I grew up in, the times we grew up with, you know, the John Wayne, you know, men do it on their own.
Rugged individuals.
Everybody got there by themselves, you know. As I got a little older, I discovered that anybody who tells you they achieved any great success on their own is just a liar. But people say that, and when you're young, you believe it, and so you're stuck with it. The other irony of this is that after the community college instructors helped me develop my career as a writer and helped me start selling works to different newspapers and magazines and things like that, which they helped me do, I had a successful career. You know, I went on to help create the public radio program Marketplace, which the Public Radio Network asked me to do.
Now, I hear Marketplace, and it sounds like a great, fully informed program. You were one of the originators of that, what, decades ago?
Yeah, we started that program in 1987. There were originally 4 of us. I was the first or second person recruited by the creator of the program, Jim Russell, a legendary public radio producer and a good friend of mine to this very day. As a matter of fact, he's working with me in my latest venture, the first thing that he and I have worked on together since Marketplace. And Jim was the Saigon bureau chief for UPI during the Vietnam War.
Wow.
And is a very famous voice on American radio and in political reporting, and a wonderful colleague of mine. Had the success with Marketplace. We got that off the ground. Inc. magazine hired me to be a correspondent. They sent me all over the world covering business and economics and finance. Traveled to China, Russia, Singapore, Taiwan, Thailand, you name it, reporting on economic and business stories. The Chronicle hired me to write for their SF Gate.
Oh.
And then CNBC hired me as a Silicon Valley correspondent for their website. So I had a fairly successful career in journalism and media. And 25 years after my experience at Foothill College, there was a vacancy on the Board of Trustees at Foothill College. And the faculty approached me, many of my old friends and teachers, and said, you know, there's never been a graduate of Foothill College on our Board of Trustees, and we'd like you to be the first. And I said, well, that's very flattering. I'd love to do it, but I can't afford a campaign. So they organized a campaign on my behalf. And they raised the first $5,000 amongst themselves.
Wow.
To create a campaign that led to me being elected on the Foothill College Board of Trustees. The final irony in this story, and And one of the reasons I'm so grateful to our community and the people who helped me at the community college and so dedicated to trying to open those doors even wider to others. I remember my poor mother, who had struggled with mental illness, and you might remember her.
Kitty, sure.
You did know her. She was a wonderful person, and the people who remember her, even now, we lost her in 1989, remember her so fondly. But she used to always say that what she's really living for is she just wants to see my name on a college diploma. Some college, I got to get my name on a college diploma. A couple of years ago, when I was board president at Foothill Anza, one of my honors was to be able to sign the diplomas of all of the college graduates. So there are now several thousand college diplomas floating around this community that have my name on it. And unfortunately, my mom didn't live to see it, but I hope that in some way she experienced it.
Well, and I think there's a real important story there, too. I don't want to call it rags to riches, maybe an educational rags to riches, the enrichment that you've had and that you've brought to others through Marketplace and so many other pieces that you've worked on. And so you've developed a desire to do a number of interesting things, including textbooks. And I think one of your crowning achievements has been to make education more affordable in terms of the costs of all those books every quarter.
Well, that's become my passion over the last few years, and I came to it from journalism. I explain a lot of this on my blog, www.halplotkin.com, and the history of all. But it actually started out as a journalistic assignment. A few years ago, the president of MIT made an announcement that I was one of the few reporters who really thought it was important to write about. That they were going to be releasing all of the learning materials that they use in their classes into the public domain for free use by anybody else. And I could instantly remember when I was a community college student, I'd get the community college catalog and I'd go to the bookstore and I'd see what courses I could afford to take. You know, if the books were going to be $180 or $200 and I'm making $1.75 an hour, then I'm going to have to, you know, figure out how to do that. There was financial aid available then and now for tuition, but the financial aid available for textbooks was very limited and very hard to come by. And so when the MIT announced that they were going to put these learning materials into the public domain, and then dozens of other schools started to do it, I started writing these columns about why isn't the public education system harvesting this material, if it's free, high quality, coming from these great schools,
Sure.
and making it available to students like community college students. It could accelerate their progress through school, and we wouldn't be telling students, as I was told, that as soon as you finish a class, you should sell your book back to the bookstore.
Right.
You know, I mean, you never walk into an educated person's home and say, you know, where are your books? And they say, oh, we sold them all back to the bookstore.
Right.
But we're expecting that poor people are going to be able to better themselves through education by getting rid of their books the minute that they're no longer needed for a test.
Right. We're going to take a little break right now. Hal, when we come back, I want to hear the end of this, and there's so much more to talk about.
Great, thank you.
Thomas Wolfe once said, America is a wonderful country. It is a place where miracles not only happen, but they happen all the time. I believe in America, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. I'm the State Superintendent of Schools in California, Delane Easton. I'm a Democrat. I feel very strongly that I'm here today because of some wonderful people that went before me to give me some great opportunities in this state and in our nation. If you believe, as I do, that the Democratic Party is a place where we can make an enormous difference for children across our land, then I hope you'll think about helping that party out. They need volunteers, and they'd love for you to come down. Their number is 408-445-9500. You'll meet a lot of wonderful people, and you'll really get involved in shaping the future of California. I hope you can help. Thanks very much.
Welcome back to Democratic Television and our guest, Hal Plotkin. You were talking about the desire to get textbooks online so that students wouldn't have the extra expenses, and that seems to have taken off quite a bit.
Yes, Steve. So I wrote these stories about it and was kind of frustrated that I didn't see the public sector responding. And then this opportunity that I described earlier came up to run for the Foothill Anza board, and I saw these two things coming together, that there'd be an opportunity to use service on that board to advance this project. So after joining the Foothill de Anza board, I wrote and sponsored and managed to push through. It took a couple of years. The first policy in the nation, the first policy on public domain learning materials by a higher education institution. And it's become a model that's now being replicated across the country, indeed internationally. But what it said simply was that one of the purposes of our community college district is to help faculty who want to organize or use or maintain materials that are in the public domain as substitutes for commercial textbooks. Up until we had this policy, this was not a responsibility of the community college administrators or of the system itself. And what we did is we made it a responsibility of our college district, and we asked our chancellor, Dr. Martha Cantor, to come back to our board once a year and report to us on our progress. And of course, we're blessed at Foothill de Anza to have Dr. Martha Cantor, who has since been named Undersecretary of Education.
Very thrilling news.
Where she's able to expand on this work. And Dr. Cantor welcomed this policy, helped us push it through the community college district. Ironically, she had had an idea that was very, very similar 10 years earlier, but couldn't get any support for it. So we formed a partnership on it. We became the first community college district to make this an official purpose. And Dr. Cantor and her colleagues, Dr. Judy Baker and Dr. Barbara Olowski at de Anza, organized a consortium. One day, Dr. Cantor came to me and said, you know, Hal, I think your idea is great, and it would be wonderful if we could do it here at Foothill de Anza. But we can't possibly create public domain learning materials for all of the different classes. We can do a few. But if we could form a partnership with other college districts, and if they made public domain learning materials in other areas and we could all share them, we could make public domain learning materials for the entire curriculum, or at least some big part of it. And so Dr. Cantor and her colleagues, with my help, organized the Community College Consortium for Open Education Resources. It's a big, long acronym, CCCOER.
And how much is that a statewide, national?
Well, now it's international. We have over 85 colleges and universities participating in it. A formal steering committee. We meet periodically. We're sharing information and resources. And the sweetest thing of all is the first implementation of all of this was just this last quarter at de Anza College, where if you now take statistics, the books that used to cost on average over $100, $130 per student are free. And so we're saving students per class $80,000 per class. That's money that goes right back into their pockets that they can spend on math, or rather spend on their rent or their living expenses and whatever. And these free textbooks are starting to proliferate throughout the system. Not only are they free, but it turns out they're better. That would take a whole nother half an hour to talk to you about. But one of the reasons that they're better is they allow something that we call multiple representations of topic matter from different perspectives. Lots of people are contributing to these free resources. So for example, a student who may not have English as a native language could use some of these free resources to read the free book in their own language, or to even hear a college professor giving a lecture about the topic in Spanish or Hindi or whatever other language.
Now that sounds very applicable with all the non-native speaking students.
Well, it's essential, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, Steve. We can make so much more progress in this area. You know, there's all this talk in California about, for example, how we want people to have English literacy. And, you know, there have been these movements around the country to English as an official language and denigrating people who don't speak English.
Right.
And all of that kind of stuff. The state of California has no place where somebody who wants to learn English can go online 24/7 and learn English in a way that would articulate with a community college or a university class. It would be so easy for us to set that up with the resources that we have right now. There are so many modes. Look how our ESL, English as a Second Language, are packed.
They're bursting.
All the time, all the time.
Oversold.
The state could invest a pittance in creating a free online resource that those students could use, with or without registering, that could raise the level of English proficiency in this state quite dramatically with a very small investment. But that work doesn't get done. Again, I think it's just because there's this huge disconnect between the policymakers that in government and the rather gilded lives that many of them have had, and the experiences of the rest of us, those of us who went to community college, who had to struggle to buy books, who went to state colleges. We're often not represented in the higher levels of government, and so the real life issues that we have are not reflected in the policies that government puts forward.
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit. You've put together a nonprofit recently and working on Center for Responsive Journalism. I know that's not exactly the title.
Yeah, it's called the Center for Media Change.
There you go.
It's a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit. It comes out of my life's passion. A lot of the work that I've done as a journalist has been about, and it's why we started Marketplace, for example, to bring economic news to, and a perspective on economic news that we were not getting at the time from the big three networks that used to dominate things. And the Center for Media Change is an opportunity to democratize the media as well. We have two big projects. The first is called realchanges.org. That's R-E-E-L, changes.org. And what we do there is we help documentary filmmakers raise money from the public for their projects. So part of the problems right now for documentary filmmakers, you know, there's all this garbage on TV, insulting to the intelligence, whether it's reality shows or car crashes or just, you know, it's, they cater, these mass media marketeers cater to the lowest common denominator. It's kind of the impulse that people have when there's a wreck on the freeway and everybody cranes their neck to see. They understand that. They try to exploit that for commercial purposes. As a result, serious journalism often gets underfunded if it gets funded at all. And there's a great number of very serious, capable journalists with important stories to tell out there that cannot get funding or financing through the traditional media system to get those stories told.
And that's why you formed Real Changes to
Real Changes. So if you go to Real Changes, you'll see we have about 50 projects up right now, documentary filmmakers, many of them who've done work on HBO and some Academy Award winners, very highly respected journalists and filmmakers who have stories to tell that are appealing to the public to help them get the resources to tell these stories. We have another site that we're the fiscal sponsor of. My colleague David Cohen came up with a site called www.spotus, S-P-O-T.us. And this is a wonderfully innovative new project where we're helping finance local investigative journalism. As you know, the newspapers are dying. And we need a way not only to employ the reporters who are all being laid off, but also to give communities access to the news and information they need to hold public officials accountable and to put sunshine onto processes that fester in the darkness where there's no adequate journalism.
I think we're all worried about the demise of the papers and the loss of those professional writers who know how to get in there, work to bring out fact, what is really going on, rather than just opinion.
Right, and I'm happy to say our sites have been written up now. The Poynter Institute had a post, that's the big think tank about journalism that called us the future of journalism, and we're establishing the new models. Our theory is that not everybody cares about the same thing, but everybody cares about something enough to be willing to spend $10 to help the media get that story right. And we're learning as we go. We're the first people to ever do this. But we won grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Knight Foundation, the Full Circle Fund, half a dozen others. We probably raised a little over $250,000 over the last year for these two ventures. And they're beginning to get some traction and more importantly, beginning to fill that news hole that's been created by the demise of our local papers, which are, for all intents and purposes, almost dead already.
Are you being able to bring in the reporters that used to do this great work that we used to read every morning when we pick up our paper outside?
Yes, yeah, we're working now in the Bay Area with many highly skilled but recently laid off reporters. One of the first reporters that we were able to fund through Spot Us for a story that you didn't see anyplace else about the rise of these Hoovervilles in Santa Clara County and around the Bay Area. I don't know if you know it, but our Spot Us reporter broke the story about the fact that if you go to a Costco or a Home Depot parking lot at night, almost anywhere in the Bay Area, you see these roving, rolling Hoovervilles of people who pull into the parking lots to sleep. And they're sort of being tolerated by the Costco people. It's not like the Hoovervilles of old, the 10 cities that you've been reading about in Sacramento.
Right.
Because, you know, they're all these people living in their cars. They arrive after the store's closed. They leave before the store opens. It's escaped the attention of the so-called mainstream media. I don't call it the mainstream media, by the way. I call it the corporate-owned news media, because I think the acronym is more accurate. CONUM, the corporate-owned news media.
Got it.
They're not on that story, but our reporter was on that story and wrote a very important piece that sort of explained what's happening. And it's true. If you want to find out for yourself, get out of bed some night at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and drive to your local Costco or Home Depot and look in the parking lot and you get a real understanding of what's happening in the part of the economy that's not being covered by the news media today.
We have about 2 more minutes left, Hal, and I'd like you to share with our viewers how they can get in contact with you, get involved in some of your projects. You're clearly ahead of the curve, and I'm so happy that you're here with us now, but please tell us.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the easiest way to do it is just to go to my blog, www.halplotkin.com. I'm happy to say my blog now has a higher Google page rank than mercurynews.com. that just happened in the last couple of weeks. We have actually more traffic and more links that if you just do a Google page rank check, you see we have more traffic than the Mercury News does right now. So halplotkin.com would be a great way to do it. Another way would be to friend me on Facebook. I'm trying to build a good community of people who are interested in my work and my projects on Facebook. So if you're not a Facebook member, go ahead and sign up for Facebook. It's easy. And if you are a Facebook member, please just do a search for my name and ask to be my friend, and I'd love to invite more people into our circle.
And I'm sure we have about a minute left. You have a number of links that some of you have referred to in the show about real changes and the media information and all.
Yeah, you'll find all of that stuff both on halplotkin.com, or you can just go to plotkin.com. I also have that one if you Plotkin, and or Facebook, and you'll find links to Real Changes. The thing about Real Changes is it has 2 E's. I haven't been able to afford to buy the one with the A in it. And if we get a little bit more financial support, we'll buy that URL as well.
Great. Well, Hal, thank you very much for being on Democratic Television. Keep up your great work. We look forward to hearing more about you and the important projects you take on.
It's a delight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for watching Democratic Television. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website, www.sccdp.org. Help make a difference, and we'll see you on the campaign trail.